All right, it is time for another day of Odinmade Hero. Coming off a pretty long weekend, which wasn't intentional. Yesterday just got away from me with all the other things that I need to take care of. The kids did not want to be happy, and so I had to step up and do dad duty to help accommodate things. So they're much happier today, so that's nice. And we can continue the stream. And it's going to be a short week anyways because we have the holiday on Thursday. So I think I'll probably just do the stream today, tomorrow, and Friday. Maybe I'll do one Saturday or Sunday too, but I'm not going to promise anything. But we'll at least do Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. And on last Friday, we were just doing some examination of where to go next. Well, Casey was, with a little bit of feedback from the stream, but for the most part, he was just kind of mapping out all of the things that are left to do in Handmade Hero to have a relatively complete engine. And so we will continue to go in this direction towards doing all of these things in Odinmade Hero, right? So that's the whole deal here. I didn't do my whole spiel about how this is the series where we do Handmade Hero in the Odin programming language, but again, I think at this point, if you're still here, you know what the deal is. So one thing I did do, which I managed to find time earlier today to do, was take a look at replacing this hash array, I guess you might call it, or hash list, with an Odin map, right? This used to be something like this, I think. I went ahead and tried using one of Odin's maps, and it was a little bit more difficult than I really appreciated at first, for reasons I'll explain in a minute. But if I just run it, I can show you that we do have parity with where we were before. And I don't know that this implementation actually covers all of the bases that we want covered in the same way that the old one was, but I'll just kind of walk through it and then I'll think more about it, and maybe by the end of this stream, I'll feel better about it. It feels like I'm missing a case possibly, but I really don't know because this is all, just a little bit of a different kind of programming than what I'm used to, and so I have to think about things just from a different angle and be in a different problem space. So that being said, I've been getting better and better at intuiting where to take things based on the knowledge that Casey has been equipping us with so far. So I went ahead and did exactly what I said I'd do. I took out both of the storage indices on A and B, right? Because this, tying them together, gives you a rule about whether or not those two particular entities collide or not. But the way I thought might make more sense to think about this is that if we just have a map where the index to, or rather the storage index to each entity maps to a rule that is paired with one other entity, then we just need one index, and that is the entity that the rule is for. But if we go into here, we added this rule, not this rule, but this note with Casey. I can't remember if it was during a Q&A or just in the middle of an episode of code. But he spells it out here where he says, one way to make removal of a collision rule easy would be to always have both orders of the pairs of storage indices in the hash table. So basically store them twice, kind of inverted, looking at each other. And so then you're paying for the cost of storage twice, but then you don't have to walk the whole thing to clear a rule out, because you might have, any random place inside of the table could contain a rule that pertains to that entity. And you don't want to have to examine the whole thing. You want to just go to the places where you know you can expect to find a rule that pertains to that entity, right? And that's basically what the rest of this is. No matter which position the entity is in, you can always find it. Then when you do your first pass for removal, just remember the original top of the free list, and when you're done, do a pass through all the new things on the free list, remove the reverse of those pairs. We don't have a free list, so we're doing these a little bit differently here, but I think it works basically the same way. And so that's probably the place to start explaining it. I create a dynamic array of indices that we care about. We're going to clear, in this call, we're going to clear all of the rules pertaining to collision for the entity at this storage index. And because I'm mapping all the rules for that entity at its key in the map, we just get it out and then we walk the whole thing. And as we're walking the whole thing until we get to the end of it, right, we just append the storage index for the other entity, right, that makes up the other half of the rule. We store that in this list. We get rid of that index that was passed in, get rid of the key. So now all of those rules are gone. And then we look for that entity's rule in the other direction according to all these other indices that say, hey, there's another rule somewhere. There's another collision rule somewhere. At these other indices, we go and look for them, and then we just do the exact same logic that was in here. You can see I still have this code here because I'm not confident that this solution as a whole, as I've arrived at, is actually what we want. It might not cover an edge case, but I can't see it. I don't know what I don't know. I haven't run into that edge case, so I just don't know. But again, from just testing the thing and throwing the rock at the trees and at the monster and at the familiar, I don't see anything weird going on. It looks like it's doing exactly what we want it to. So that's on the other side of it, right? When we clear the collision rules, once that entity, I think that only happens in one place. Once the sword's distance limit has come down to 0, right? We want to clear all of those rules. There might be another place, but no, it looks like that's it. So what about when we add the rule, right? Probably makes more sense to start there, but it's too late now. We're in too deep. So I figured we don't need to sort them now because either way, we're going to store it in both places. We want the key. We want each index that makes up the rule, for both entities that make up the rule. We want it to be stored in pairs, right? And so it doesn't really matter which one we store first. Either way, if it's a new rule that we didn't have before, if that entity's key didn't exist in the collision table, then we want to add it in both places. And so I just tried to think about it in that manner and modify this code accordingly. So we don't do any masking of the entity's index to get at the index in the collision rule hash list because it's just a map now. We just use the plain entity index. And again, we're not sorting anything to make things simpler. And first we look for the rule, right? Because we don't want to re-add it. And if we find it, we do that. So none of that's really different. We just match on one. We match on the other entity storage index instead of the the first entity, index A versus index B, right? We only compare one of them because we're only storing the one index on the rule. It's just kind of, the more and more I look at this, the more and more I don't feel totally happy with it, but I'm going to just stick with it for now because we want to actually get into this day's code and not get bogged down in trying to think of a better way to do this. I think I like it a little bit better just because I'm actually using a map, one of Odin's maps, and it just seems a little bit simpler for me to reason about. But anyway, I don't know if it's a flawless, bug-free implementation. So I have this new rule bool that says, if we manage to find an existing rule up here, then we don't go in here and we don't assign it to true. But if we didn't find it then we have to create a new one. So we do that all the same, but we want to mark that we made a new rule. So that way down here, we can add it in the opposite direction. So I just pass in index B and index A, right? And so I think that works out pretty nicely. I can't really see a reason why it wouldn't, because if we do find it, right, then we're still going to do this here, but we're not going to add the rule in the opposite direction. It feels like we could be missing adding some rules is the thing that I'm really worried about, and why I keep on saying, you know, I don't know that this is flawless, because but if we do find it, it sure seems like just calling this again, but in the opposite direction, is going to give us exactly what we want, right? Because then when it comes back around and adds it again, right, it'll basically be passing in index A and then index B on the next time. It's going to find it, right? Because at that point, we've written to that rule. So I think that's how that'll work out. I think it'll work out just fine. Again, it seems to be running fine, but I'm leaving that old code in there until I am absolutely confident that this doesn't suck. The thing that I don't like about it is that, you know, without knowing that these things go together, it kind of seems like, looking at it now, that both indices should be on the rule. And you could probably still use the map, I guess, but then that just feels redundant, right? Because we're already using one of the entity indexes to actually store the rule. So something about it just doesn't feel quite right to me, but you know what? I'm doing my best. So we're just gonna roll into day 71 of Handmade Hero, converting to full 3D positioning, where I think we're going to start hashing out the Z direction stuff a little bit more, and we'll just see how it goes. I don't know. I'm hoping that I won't be here for 2 hours. I really want to try and get fast enough to where I'm doing all the coding stuff in like an hour and a half, but I just wind up, you know, getting stuck on and rambling about too many different things. But we'll see. I just keep on going back and forth in my head with what I want to do, because 5 streams a week is not an overwhelming time commitment, but 10 hours a week can really cut into other things. Not that I don't want to keep doing the stream. It's just like, how do I structure things? Like, are we going to land on like a 3 days a week type of thing, or a once a week type of thing? Because ultimately, Handmade Hero doesn't go on forever and ever, right? And I've said it time and again, at some point there's going to be a place where I feel comfortable enough to just kind of go off and do my own thing. And so then maybe the weekly stream, if it becomes a weekly stream, it just becomes like a devlog where I'm talking about things I've experimented with, things I'm adding to a game, you know, what different game projects I might be working on. I really don't know. It remains to be seen. Devil said, just sleep less like a true programmer. You know what? I just can't do it. I really like my sleep at this point. And over the years, you know, I've realized that I don't really make meaningful progress forward towards a substantial goal that I have by just throwing more hours at the problem. There is certainly an amount of time that is necessary to apply yourself in a direction to be able to go in that direction, right? But you get to a certain amount of momentum where it's just wasted energy. And I've always been conscious of that, and I try to optimize that as best I can, but there's only so much you can do if you don't know how much energy to put towards something. I think you get to a point where you've thrown so much effort at something, and then everybody else is so out of sync with you, you're like, okay, maybe I should slow down. And this is always a recurring theme, and like all the other projects that I've tackled, and just also like in life too, not just with work stuff. But anyway, point is, I like to sleep. I just can't handle being on low sleep, especially with 2 really young kids now. It's not an option. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump in.
Start recording. All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Handmade Hero, the show where we code a complete game live from scratch on Twitch. No engine, no libraries, just us. And right now we're in the process of sort of working through our to-do list.
Oh, and I did want to say, I noticed this, the channel hit on YouTube, the channel hit 500 subscribers. So thank you to all of you who are following on YouTube and checking out what I'm doing. I appreciate it. We'll see where we wind up.
We made a to-do list on Friday where we kind of said, like, wait a minute, we're kind of gotten relatively far here on stuff that we want to spec out. We're trying to basically build out our entire engine superstructure, if you will, so that everything kind of fits together nicely. And we still have a lot of work to do on any individual piece of it. So there's a bunch of stuff that we haven't done in terms of the actual components, but we're just trying to make sure we know how everything fits together. And so on Friday we made a to-do list that was basically like, let's think about all the things that we would need to do before we're done. And so now at least we're in a position where we can just kind of go take a quick look when we come to a stopping point on any particular thing that we're working on. We can go take a peek at that and go, what are the things that we still have to do? Let's pick a good one to do next and go do it. And so that'll be pretty handy, allowing us to not forget, basically, to do something. Oftentimes what I will do when I'm programming, not on the stream, just my regular day programming, is actually keep a notebook next to me. And I've actually heard multiple people do this. And it wasn't like we got together and talked about it and all decided to do it. I've actually heard multiple people do exactly the same thing independently, completely never having talked to them, or them having talked to each other, and it just turned out to be the thing that people do. On the notebook, we write out the things that we still want to remember to do as a list on the notebook next to us when we're programming. And then, every so often, when the page gets full, we go to a new page, and we copy the list down again, filtering it by removing stuff that we no longer want to do or that isn't applicable, or that we finished or whatever. And for some reason, this is very popular. I don't know why. It's much more popular than using like an actual like to-do manager or something. There's something about the act of writing it and copying it that is somehow important that nobody knows why, but that's what happens. So we have the next best thing. We have an actual to-do list that I can display on the screen, since we need that, since you wouldn't be able to see my notebook if it was sitting here. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to go start tackling that. Before I start, this is day 71. So if you are trying to follow along at home, what you want, and you've pre-ordered the game on handmadehero.org, what you want to do is download day 70 source code. Well, you download all the source code together, but you want to unpack day 70 source code. And that's what we're starting with today, if you want to follow along. So let's go ahead and open up that to-do list, because we basically put
I actually just started trying this thing where I've got like a little notepad, and I'm actually concretely writing out, things with pen and paper again. It's been a long time. Typically what I've done for a long time now is just make a new file, call it like notes.markdown, and then just start writing markdown to keep track of notes. But that becomes horribly disorganized because I've just got random markdown files all over the place. And I don't have like an easy way to just like bring them up. I tried Obsidian, which is like that note-taking, file sharing app, but I'm not committed to it fully. And I don't want to spend money to be able to share my notes back and forth. So I'm just doing the old pen and paper thing and seeing how that goes. And maybe it'll stick, but I don't know. I've never been very good at note taking.
Much stuff there, and there's also a brief thing. Maybe I'll do this right at the start here before we do that. There was a to-do, like a bug that someone noticed on the forums that I want to mark down in the actual code where it actually happened. So in our familiar, I guess that's over here. So we have not yet moved our entity code out, so we're still actually doing our entity updates in here. I said I'd want to move them to handmadeentity.cp. We haven't quite done that yet. Anyway, one of the things that we did not do is we kind of were playing around with doing this before. Somebody had said, what if we made familiars follow other familiars? And we had kind of hacked that together. And one of the things we did was change the test distance squared to basically weight heroes as if they were closer than familiars, just to try and make it so that familiars would follow heroes when heroes were close by. In doing so, we never actually went and updated the code to still store whatever the actual distance was. And so as a result, this code is it's moving things closer than they should be because of this multiplication by 0.75 that we kind of had hacked in there at the time. So what I'd like to do, since we removed that sort of play code that we were doing, I'd like to remove this and make it back the way that it used to be. And so that way now that won't be in there. So it's just a little cleanup. We had sort of introduced some code when we were playing around at the end of a stream, and we didn't quite restore it to proper working order when we had stopped. And so now the familiar at least should be presumably at the distance that we thought it should be, which is not really a big change, but it's better to have it that way in case we end up using some of that code in the final stuff. We don't want to then have to figure out why we have a bug. Anyway, so let's go ahead and grab our handmade.h here where we have our to-do list. And you can kind of see that we have it broken down here. And I was kind of saying that, like, well, we've only got 5 more days of programming. Excuse me. It's getting on allergy season here in Seattle, so I may still be sniffly for a while, even though I'm not really sick anymore. So we sort of said, so we only have 5 days before we go on break. People were asking for a break so they can catch up. before we go on break for a week, let's focus on things that we have that have been sort of accruing that we'd like to just kind of finish up instead of getting into something new, like some of these new things that we were brainstorming on Friday that needed to get done before we actually start production work on the game. And so what I was thinking there was, maybe let's save the collision detection for now. Let's do something since it's Monday, start something a little bit more straightforward. Let's clean up our use of Z a little bit. Let's just take a quick look at that, go through the code once, clean up the places where we weren't using vector 3s where we could have been, and maybe just kind of like get that a little bit more tightened up so that we don't constantly have different things in there for Z versus not Z. And so I think the place that I want to start with this was we had this notion of a world difference, and really a world difference doesn't need to exist at all, because all it was is just a vector 3 where we have the distance in all three. But when we originally wrote it, we didn't have a vector 3, so we were still, well, we didn't have any vectors at all, and then we had only a vector 2, so we moved to this. So I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of that class entirely. And then I'm just going to go fix all the places.
So, wow, looks like he was using that in way more places than I was. Well, way more places than I would have thought, because I actually didn't implement that at all. I just went straight to using a vector 3. But actually, it reminds me that I think I'm still using, what is it for, like the draw rectangle call. Yeah, I'm still using RGB individually. I guess that would be a place he may have already, well, he's about to add vector 3, so I guess not, but maybe he'll do this anyways. I could just do this, I think, and then do that, and that might be it. Where all are we calling this? So we can just do that now, and that. Oh, here we go. See, this makes this a bit neater too, because I can just do piece.color.rgb, and over here, what is this? What is that 10 value? What is the third param here? It's the max. I see. It's just splatting in a vector 2 with x and y values of 10. So for here, I can just do that, and then I think we're back to where we want to be. Probably make it take an alpha so we could have transparent rectangles, but I don't feel like it. Not right now.
Places that we're actually using it to just use vector 3s directly from now on, right? And so that's kind of handy, because now what we can do is we can actually just sort of unify a lot of this code, I think, to make it so that we don't have to worry about that anymore. So this still gets out the tile difference, the d tile xy there. And what we can do is we can roll this computation in there as well, because basically that's all the same, like so. And then
okay, so I was kind of curious about this. I'm gonna have to make a little bit of change, but not too much. He just kind of bundles this together, and then we can call it, I don't know, I mean, it should just be d-tile at that point, right? I don't know why you would need to designate it xyz. Excuse me. And this should be a v3 now. And then, yeah, how's he going to handle this? Because that's why I didn't really mess with this too much, other than making the return value a v3. Because it's just treated differently based on these offsets, which are specifically v2s.
When we do our chunk side in meters, we don't really know yet how big our Z chunks are going to be. So maybe I spoke a little too soon there. Maybe I don't quite want to do that because I'm not sure what we want to do with that. Maybe that's the first thing I kind of have to think through a little bit more carefully. Basically, our chunks are probably not going to be symmetric in Z. So when we multiply this, we probably do want to actually say, okay, let's go ahead and make sure that our code handles that asymmetry. So I'm going to go into the place where we're storing a chunk side in meters, and also do a chunk height in meters, basically, if you will. Or maybe we want to call it depth in meters, maybe is a little bit better. I'm not sure what we want to call it exactly. It's kind of ambiguous, because you usually think of width and height, but then you think of height in the world as being high. So I don't actually know, what the best way to think of that is. But we can think of it that way. The other thing I could do here is actually change that chunk side in meters to be something that was actually just a vector. In fact, maybe that's a fun thing to do. We could do like something like v3 chunk dim in meters, something like that, right? And then it basically has the dimension in each x, y, and z, and then we can make them be whatever we want, right? And that would be interesting here because then I can unify these, right? Then I can pull these in like this, and then what I do here is I just bust out what I was talking about before. You remember I talked about the Handmade product, right? I don't know if we ever actually implemented the Handmade product. We're going to want to because it's useful, especially for working with colors.
All right. So it's getting a little bit more tricky than I expected. I hoped that I could just sit back and watch him drop V3s in everywhere and do nothing, but that was optimistic. So we're going to have this chunk dim in meters, and it's going to be V3. And then I assume that this just lets us get rid of that. Like that. V32 is, yeah, that's not a type. What was I thinking there? And then this can still be like this, but we're getting rid of chunk side in favor of chunk dim. And now yeah, how's that going to work? I mean, I guess what I could do is Handmade going to be on LinAlg? Honestly, don't know. It sure looks like it. What does it take? It's just... oh, wow, it's coming off intrinsics. Well, I don't know if this will just work like I hope it will, but I hope it will.
So I'm going to go ahead and do the Handmade product, and I can say that we have the chunk dim in meters, and I'm going to multiply that by that detail XYZ now, so this is a full one now, right? And then what I can do is I can add essentially just my, this will be good. This is going to get us a lot of little tricks in there. And this is just our result can just be right here. I'll show you the other trick that I was going to, or not trick, but like thing I wanted to add to our math library. So the Handmade product here, so basically this tells us what our chunk difference was now, and we get to do that sort of all at once so that we can kind of do it without having to split it up into multiple axes anymore. And then we have an offset here. And
okay, I guess we'll worry about these offsets in a second. But one thing I'll go ahead and do, actually I'm going to turn this into my result. And then I can just do that. And so this will be the result of that. Times that. Not getting any OLS warnings, so that's good. And so then maybe we'll just modify the XY. Kind of like this. I think that's how that will go. What's going on here? And then we just wouldn't need to do that, I think. We'll see.
that offset really should be three-dimensional as well. And so I think what we want to do is sort of move to making that just be a three-dimensional offset. So we'll let that compiler out for now, and we'll go ahead and move that to a three-dimensional offset soon as well. And then we can get rid of this because this actually just works. Now that Handmade product, I don't know if you guys remember, I talked about it a bit. I don't think we implemented one. We didn't. And so we implemented our dot product, I believe, right here. There it is. We implemented our dot product or the inner product. And so I'm just going to go ahead and also implement, while we're at it, the Handmade product for both V2s and V3. So that's basically just taking in these guys here. And a Handmade product, although the name is fancy, it's just component-wise multiplication. So basically you multiply the x by the x and you stick it in x. You multiply the y by the y and you stick it in y. In many ways, it's exactly the same as the inner product, except for the fact that you don't sum the terms. So you notice here we do x times x and y times y, and we sum the terms. For the Handmade product, we leave the terms separate as they were, right? And so that result is basically exactly the same as here, but instead we just actually keep the two terms separate and put them into their respective positions. I don't know why I typed a plus there. Lazy shift key, right? So that is all that's happening with the Handmade product. And similarly, we can do it for the V3. I don't know, did we ever do our inner product or anything for the V3? We haven't really done anything for our V3, have we? Our V3 is basically just sitting there. We implemented literally like nothing for our V3s. I don't even know what we're using it for. That's kind of crazy. We implemented absolutely nothing, which is kind of bizarre. Yeah, all right, well. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this. Now, a lot of people don't like to do this, and that's totally fine. I'm not gonna yell at anyone for this sort of thing. basically, like, what I do almost invariably is I do not go get template happy here and start making templates, because I find that it's just more trouble than it's worth. Worse error messages, worse compile time, worse everything, and it's so easy, really, to just go through and change it once. Yes, you may make some stupid mistakes. Yes, there may be there's a little extra typing involved. Oops, I want to go ahead and do a replace just in this region. I don't deny that, and so if you do want to go the template route, I'm totally fine with that. But I just have found that typically, because it's so rare that you do stuff here, typically you make this math file once and then you're done with it forever. You'll debug it once and then that's it. I just find that introducing that kind of nastiness, it just doesn't pay off. It isn't worth the hassle, because you'll be left with those nasty additional compile times and additional error message ugliness and all these extra things you'll be left with after you've debugged it. And whereas in this case, once you do that debugging once, you're in kind of nice, beautiful land that doesn't have any more problems. So anyway, I'm just going to go.
Again, I'll just point out how great it is that I don't have to worry about any of this, because array programming is just baked into Odin, and that's like the only use case that I had for doing a lot of sort of comp time heavy code was trying to implement kind of the equivalent of templates to have different operations for different sizes of vectors. And that's just, not having to deal with that is great. It's such a relief, because then I also know if I come across other Odin code, it's all just going to fit together if I need to integrate with other stuff. Again and again, I am won over by this language.
Go through here really quickly and build out our vector 3s as well. And again, this is just literally doing what your template would have done. So if you do want to do this with a template, knock yourself out. All you're going to have to do is basically, if you don't know how to program templates, then you probably don't want to do it. But assuming you do know how to program templates, this should be, trivial thing to template on. You're just going to template on the number of dimensions. And you would have to stop using the .x.y. You'd have to stop using that and start using the E syntax that we had, because you're only going to know numbers. And you'd have to put for loops in here as well and all that garbage. You have to do all that, but, if you want templates, you got to do it, right? So that's what you would do here. Okay. And so, like I said, there might be some copy and paste errors. There might be some nastiness there. What is? I don't need that. I don't know why. Why was square? Square kind of got stuck in there. That was not appropriate. Square should really be up here, kind of in a section where we have our scalar operators, kind of breaking this up roughly into like scalar operators, right? Or operations, I should say. And these are v2 operations, right? That we did there. And then here's our v3 operations. Right. And so then again, multiplication, operator by scalar, again, just a scalar times the three components, set it back into, piecewise. And then again, this is just an operator that's used for the other syntax. Then there's the times equals, which again, same thing, just end up, they're all going to call this thing. Unary minus, right, just flipping each of the things, x, y, and z, that's how vectors work. You do it to each component. Plus, same thing, do it to each component, right, so we just added the z. Plus equals, just calling that guy up again. Subtraction, basically doing the same thing as the addition was. And then we get to our Hadamard product. Our Hadamard product needs to do z now. Our inner product needs to do z now again, just adds another term onto the end. And then our length squared and our length are essentially the same calls, because they just leverage the fact that a function call overloading will just call the right thing here. And so that's all I wanted to do there. So then we get our Hadamard product, which means we can multiply out this by the scale of our chunk in all dimensions. So we're just taking the chunk the chunk distance between those two positions and multiplying it out by however much that would be, so we get our meters back. These are now going to be v3s, right? So this is going to be a v3 now, like so. I feel like this to do is less useful than it was anymore. Just to be able to figure out where they are, or rather which ones. So, well, I guess not. So it still remains to be seen. I wonder, this may be something we can actually get rid of now, which is kind of humorous. Gosh. I hate to break up the flow here, but I just want to point it out. I think we may have architected ourselves into a position where we could actually do the thing that we said we might want to do and it to do if we could figure out how to do it. The puzzler may have unpuzzled itself. And the reason that I say that is because now we no longer operate on entities without bringing them into the sim region. And in order to have brought them into the sim region, we iterated over the tile chunks, which means we don't need to know what tile chunk an entity's in anymore using its world position, right? So we would no longer have to store that. We might still use it to figure out, we still need a chunk XYZ thing that basically just lets us know which world chunk we would put this guy in. So we still need to compute X, Y, and Z's, but we wouldn't need to store them anymore. So I think the puzzler, the answer to this puzzler may actually be the sim region, solve the puzzle. So I'm going to go ahead and just say that maybe we're going to stick that solve the puzzler from world position, because we may have accidentally, by doing a bunch of other architecture work that needed to get done, we may have backed into a solution to this problem that was puzzling us before, which is pretty awesome. That would be pretty awesome. Okay, so there's our world positioning. I'm just going to generate more compiler errors and work through them here. So now when we do is canonical, our world side, chunk side in meters, we need to now know basically which dimension this actually was when we do is canonical. So you can see when someone calls this canonical, they're basically going to have to know which one that was. Now that's the only place I believe. Oh no, there's a couple. There's two other places that call it. Okay, so basically what's going to happen here is the is canonical needs to know what the chunk side in meters actually is. We could do that in two ways, but since world is only really used to access it, I'm thinking maybe what we do is we just pass that. So we do chunk side in meters, or we do chunk dim like that, and we replace this with chunk dim like so. And then when those guys use to pass the world, instead what they're doing is now they're passing chunk dim in meters, this thing right.
Okay, I think I can see how this comes together. Yeah. Whoa, what did I just do? Go back over here. We're going to replace that with the chunk dim being passed in, like you said. And then this should be, what was that? Yeah, it's just a V3 of floats, so that makes sense. And then in here, right, where we're calling this, we want to do this for X, Y, and Z. So chunk dim meters X and Y. And Z. What happened there? Oh. That's right. This needs to be changed to a V3 now. And then where, well, I guess it doesn't matter if, yeah, because wherever we're passing this in, it's just going to be a V3 now. Okay, I think we're good.
Here, right? They're passing chunk dim in meters, and they're going to pass the X for the X, and they're going to pass the Y for the Y, right? And so, you know, pretty simple code modification there. Yeah, works that out. And so now, for canonical, I suppose what we should also do is start adding the Z in there, because now we're going to want to start validating our Z's as well. Chunk dim in meters, like so. So we'll go ahead and do that. Excuse me. And then we're just going to keep on going, right? We're just going to keep on pushing through that. That'll do, actually that does it right there. We don't actually have to do any more there, so I'm just going to let the compile errors guide us here. Not a member of V2, you are right, sir. That's because now we're taking V3s. All right, and so when we initialize the world, we need to actually go ahead and set that up. We need to set up that chunk side meters to basically be something reasonable. Now, I don't think we want to use this value for Z, because I think Z is going to want to be smaller than that. I feel like our Z slices are only going to be like kind of one tile deep. So, you know, if our tiles are square, then I would say that our chunk side for Z is actually just going to be that tile side, right? So it's just going to be one tile high, and when they stack up, because we're not storing a 16 by 16 like we were. I feel like that's probably how we want to slice it. Again, we don't have tiles anymore per se, so this is really a meaningless measure. We could just stick a number of meters in here. The tiles per chunk is not useful. It's not really a useful metric. It's mostly just something we're kind of still using to guide our construction, but we could totally pull that out eventually and it won't matter. But either way, I think that's roughly what we want to do there. Now let me just take a quick look. I want to make sure that we're not missing something here. This stuff, get world chunk doesn't really care about those offsets, but I just want to make sure these guys aren't doing anything weird. It looks like they're all pretty good with the way that they're working. So I think that's fine. I think that's probably just fine. So what we now would move on to is the recanonicalize stuff. Oh, what did I do here? Chunk side in meters is not a member of world. It's chunk dim in meters. Let's try that again. There we go. So let's do that. And tile side in meters, I guess, is also something we probably want to get rid of eventually, but you know, it's kind of there. It's a vestigial remain. It's not harming us, so we'll leave it for now. All right. So when we actually do our okay, so this is actually pretty interesting as well. I'll just kind of show you another thing that I usually often do here, and it's now's the time to do it for sure. So what you can see here is when I have this offset that I'm producing, we could be doing this entirely in bulk if we wanted to. I guess, well, you know what, never mind. I won't bother doing that. I was going to show something else, but it would just get us off topic. It really doesn't matter. But point being, our world chunk side in meters now, what we actually, again, want to do is we now want to pass that chunk dim along the axis that we're talking about. And so we're just going to pull out just that chunk dim that we're doing. And that kind of lines up nicely with how we modified is canonical, so that the data just flows right through.
All right. So that's pretty easy. Nothing too crazy. I like it when the code changes that we have to make are not involving a whole lot of very sensitive like pointers pointing at places. We're just changing some vectory stuff around, which is no big deal. And then that takes that. Is that right? Yep. And then this takes that. And then where we are calling that, we got to do it along X, Y, and Z, I would presume. And then that looks good. But then this should take a V3 now. Now it feels like I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let me see what Casey does.
Exactly as it should, and that's a good thing. And so that'll do the recanonicalize for us. But now everywhere that calls that recanonicalize is going to have to use all three. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And now we're going to have to pass that proper chunk dim in meters for each of our dimensions. Like so. There's our Y, there's our Z, right? And so there we go. Now, this is now mapping into chunk space is going to want to take a three-dimensional offset now, because again, we're extending everything to 3 dimensions, so we want to allow people to pass in offsets in Z that will get recanonicalized back correctly, because that's how the sim region is going to map those things back together. So we want to make sure that's correct. Let me go back there. We kind of got out of that quickly because I guess there were no more compilers, but I want to make sure. Yes, you can kind of see, I don't know what's going on here. So we're taking chunk position from tile position. That's basically a thing that's supposed to produce these for us. So this was, yeah. So what we want to do here is we want to kind of be able to produce a V3 out of this, because we don't have, yeah, we want to be able to produce a roll position out of that. So really what we want to do here is we would want to set that result. So I'm just going to do this here. We don't really need to do this. I'm just going to show it. So I think what we should say is basically the plane where the actual like people are standing on is generally going to be Z equals 0 for a given, like that's the basis point, right? So I think that's better than having it be the negative bottom of, negative half tile side in meters. And the reason I think that is because we don't want to have you oscillate very close to the bottom of the thing. We'd rather have you be sort of well within the Z bounds of a tile when you're standing on the ground, right? So I'm going to leave that at 0 for this. Although, I guess we still want to do this in case we set tile side in meters to be something. You know what I'm saying to you? I say. So, technically, like I was saying, that, setting it to 0, we know that would work because we know what the tile side, what our tiles per chunk is. We know our tiles per chunk is always going to be 1, right? So we essentially know what this works out to be. But in case we decide to change that later, it does seem like we would kind of want to change that. Yeah, like we kind of want to change that. Now, here's a question for you, and I guess I don't know why we weren't doing it this way to begin with. I wonder why we're not just using map into chunk space with a mapping center of 0 to always produce this. It seems kind of weird, right? So I'm not really sure why we're doing it this way. So I'm wondering if maybe we shouldn't force everything to go through here anyway. Am I totally off base there? I guess because when things get larger, maybe that wouldn't be a good idea potentially. You'd rather do the divide first, but is that really a concern? I don't know. Because we're doing the math here either way. So it kind of seems to me, like for now anyway, you would want to just go ahead and do that directly. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Right? I mean, that seems logical enough, right? You would just say, okay, we've got the tile side in meters. I'm just going to go ahead and take these and multiply them out, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and say that basically I got a V3, which is my offset, right? And the offset's going to be, whatever that abs tile x is times the. It's really just going to be, it's just going to be this. It's going to be that Hadamard product, right, of the chunk dim in meters. Oops, chunk dim in meters. It's going to be that Hadamard product of the chunk dim in meters times whatever the abs tile x, abs tile y, and abs tile z are, right? And that seems pretty easy to come by here. And we're going to probably want to do something different when we do world building anyway, and that's the only thing this was used for. So it kind of feels to me like that's a little bit better for now.
I suspect that this is not how this is going to go. In fact, I know that something is wrong by the end of this stream because I skimmed ahead for whatever reason. I wanted to see how much blackboarding he was going to do, if any, this episode. So that's what that was. But yeah, so I'm just going to comment out all that other stuff for now. And then this just kind of gets slotted in like so. Like I didn't follow, because it's been, I don't know how long it's been since we even looked at this code, but it's been long enough that I don't even fully appreciate what's going on here. I mean, I know we are getting the chunk position in the world based on the absolute tile X, Y, and Z, so that we know, right, where to, which chunk to grab. But saying that this is our, and I guess maybe this would be correct the way he's thinking about it, because if we just do the assertion on the offset being canonical, yeah, I mean, if it's wrong, that assert would fire, right? And that's what the assert is for. Or so I would think. But I suspect if it's not here, you know, obviously we're going to have a bug somewhere. I just know that much. This is supposed to be spelled out like this. And this is supposed to be a V3. And I have to make it explicit. That's fine. We can't do it because all of these are U32s or ints or something. I don't know. I can't remember what types these are. Are they U32s? They're all I32s. That's right, because we changed them over to be so that the origin would be at 000. That's right. I'm just going to do this. It's happening. The formatting migration. I'm just starting to write my code like this now because I can't help it. I see a bot. Where do I block you? There we go. Okay. Yeah, so will he just assert that is canonical? Let's find out.
And we can, that way we can worry about alignment and all that other stuff in a totally separate pass. So I think this just seems like we should just get, that's all, just goodbye. Like, why is that even there? It's just no good. And so what I'd say is we'll set our base pose to be all zeros, right? And then we will go ahead and say whatever our world position result is just going to be mapped into chunk space. We'll pass the world, we'll pass that base position, and then we'll pass the offset that we just computed. And then so we'll just leverage this routine. That way we know that it's always, everything's going through this routine. Now, eventually that may be problematic because of precision when we get way out there. But like I said, I think we're going to switch to a different thing for building worlds anyway. We haven't done world building yet. So when we do world building, we'll probably have a smarter scheme anyway. Probably something more like sim regions that like we move around to do stuff. Okay. So that seems fine to me. Our subtraction looks like it's pretty much already worked out, so that's all good.
Okay. Go ahead and finish this up. Again, I'm going to leave some of this code in here because even though, you know, it may make perfect sense to get rid of it, I just don't want to lose that context. I find that I need to see where the code is coming from to be able to appreciate where it's going. But we'll just do that for now. And I can clean things up off stream like I tend to do. I'll get rid of that. And then the base pose was just, what was that? Just a world position. I mean, can't I just pass in like a zeroed out value there? I feel like that should be all I need to do. If it's just going to be, yeah, he doesn't do anything with it. He creates that base pose and then passes it in there, totally zeroed out. And if this is true, and this is all we have to do for this code, that does make this a lot easier to follow. I just don't, how he got to the Hadamard product from here, I could not appreciate it. Because we've got these tiles per chunk values in here, and I know we're trying to get rid of the abs tile X and Y and Z altogether, but there's just a little bit too many things going on right now for me to fully appreciate where that came from.
Yeah, that's going to give us a V3 result after we do that detile. We already did that stuff. Centered chunk point. Do we even call that anymore? I don't even know if we call that anymore, but hey, it looks fine, so we'll leave it. Change entity position or location raw. That doesn't really use the offset anywhere, so I'm pretty sure that's probably fine. And then change the location regular. Yeah, I think those are probably mostly fine. So let's go ahead and port the code that uses it now. This is just going to be a V3, like so. getting our sim space P. I don't know why our sim space P was a V2. I guess we just kind of carried that through. For now, I guess I'll go ahead and well, you know what? This would be a good time to do this too. One thing that I like to do to go nuts with the anonymous unions, which I love anonymous unions, they're the best. So we basically have a struct that has an XY in it, right? And now we have a V3. And so what I'd like to do with this V3 is I'd like to be able to just say I want the XY coordinates out of it, right? That's what I'd like to be able to do there. I'd like to upgrade this routine to use V3s, but I want to do that in a second pass, so I don't change too many things at once. So what I can do, right, is I can make another struct here, right, that actually has just that, the XY in it, right? Something that looks, you know, something that looks like this, I guess, might be the thing. If I have a an XY, like so on, and you know, just a pad on here, something like this.
Once again, I don't have to do that with Odin. It all just happens for me magically. One thing that I wish I did have, though, was once we get into like doing normal vectors and what is it? Surface normals, I think is what I was trying to say. Once we get into that, I feel like it would have been nice to have a third accessor to the four elements of like a four float wide array, right? Because we get X, Y, Z, and then W, and then we get R, G, V, and A. But it would have been nice to have like the U, V, W, and I can't remember if there even is a fourth or what it would be named. But obviously the conflict there is with X, Y, Z, W, and then U, V, W, right? Like which one are you asking for, right? So I can appreciate why it's not a thing, but it would have been nice if that were possible.
Right? I mean, I know it's a little weird, but you can imagine something like this, where this way I can grab the XY by just typing XY. I'm not sure if that makes sense. I know it's a little confusing, but hopefully that you can kind of see. If I just stack enough of these things up on here, I can actually grab out the XY by just typing XY, and it's in the same place as the X and the Y, which makes it work, right? So yeah, I don't know. You can do something like that. You can also do something like this if you were so inclined. Something that looks like that if you want to be able to get out the YZ. So I don't know, it's just kind of an interesting thing. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's just kind of fun. And then you can see that code compiled properly where I did that XY. It's just kind of a fun little trick. So I kind of like to do that, and it works on all the compilers I use, so I'm pretty happy with it. Anyway, so my map into chunk space now. One problem with my map into chunk space is we are now going to have to start thinking about Z in terms of when we do that min corner, max corner stuff. Now, right now, we don't really have a concept of a three-dimensional rectangle. I don't know if we need one or not, but it does kind of seem, to some degree, like really I don't know how much we really want rectangle 2s at all. It may be that we mostly just want rectangle 3s. But again, I'm not really gonna fuss with that too much just yet. I'm gonna go ahead and make V3s out of these guys. And so one thing that you can kind of do is we can go ahead and in our handmade math, where we have these V3 constructors, we can also make them, and they're not, I don't mean C++ constructors, I just mean something that makes something else. Obviously, these are not actual constructors. So we could pass an XY for the first ones and do it like this. Oops.
And I was muted the whole time anyways. I just got a phone call, so I'll be right back. All right, well, that was not... that phone call was exactly what I expected it to be. And it's exactly the result that I knew would piss me off, so that's great. Anyways, we'll just keep moving forward here and get the stream wrapped up as soon as possible so I can go deal with that. I don't even know what to say at this point. I'm just tired of dealing with people not doing what they should be doing. And, you know, it just doesn't seem like a whole lot to ask when it's your job to do a thing, that you should do it. Okay, so what were we looking at here? Oh, yeah. So what I was saying before I got that phone call, which was somehow a blessing because it helped me realize I was muted. Yeah, so Casey made those get min and max corner functions so that it would just return this, but I just thought, what the heck, we'll just call, you know, we'll grab the min member off of the rectangle, right? I didn't really understand why now where the heck am I? Map into, there we go. Didn't really understand why we needed to make those calls, so I never made them, but I think all we need to do here, unless I'm mistaken, is maybe I have to call, yeah, I have to call XY off of those. Still not quite right. What is this error complaining about? Oh, because that's just getting you an array out. So that's right. I think I tried doing something like this before, and I realized, oh, I'm just going to have to pull them out individually. Like, I want to be able to just basically do what Casey's doing and pass them in to create the 3 wide vector this way, but that's not a thing. If there's a really neat, simple way to do that in Odin, I'm not aware of it. But what I can do is take those out, and we'll just grab the min X and Y out like this. Min X and min Y. And then same thing for the max. How do I want to do this? That's still not right. Like that. And then here, we just pass those in. Yeah, I feel like there should be, whoops, that should be min Y. I feel like there should be an easier way to do this, or a more elegant way. It's not like it's hard. It's not difficult to reason about. It's just a bunch more typing. But that looks good now.
So that we can sort of easily construct a vector 3 by
channel my anger into my craft. I gotta be honest with you, I wish that worked. That worked for something like, yeah, I don't know. I just find when I let my anger, if I try to channel my anger into anything other than just like, you know, let's just work through it and not let it, you just control the anger and be productive. Otherwise, like, it'll just be, I'll start making dumb mistakes, and I'll wind up having to solve bugs that I wouldn't otherwise need to solve. That's what happens if I program angry, right? It's different if I'm like, you know, listening to some music, or I'm playing some music and I have that anger. Like, I'm going to go out now and play some angry music after this stream is done, most likely, because it never ends with this this thing I've been going through lately, which just isn't worth going into because it'll just slow us down more. But it's all good. I'm almost there.
Extension, which is kind of nice, right? So there you go. We'll just extend those guys out for now. And same thing in here, our entity class that we have here. And again, I use the words class and constructor here. Obviously, we don't have a class or constructor, but you know what I'm talking about. I don't really mean implementation. I mean conceptually, something to think about. It is typically called the entity class. And so, imagine I had typed that if you're someone who likes classes, the actual class is better. So anyway, in our sim entity, we have, excuse me, a P which is only two-dimensional, and then we're restoring our DZs here. And so what I'd like to do is just go ahead and update all of our stuff to just go in 3 dimensions, right? Which actually shouldn't be too hard, even though that sounds like a pretty big change. It shouldn't be too big of a deal. I don't know that the chunk Z, I'm not even sure why that chunk Z is still there, to be honest with you. I'm not sure what we're doing with it. We're sort of using the chunk Z, for some reason we're just directly setting it, which doesn't super make a whole lot of sense, and we're not using the one out of here anyway, so I'm just gonna delete that, because I don't actually know why that's there or what's going on with that. All right, so we have our invalid P. Our invalid P needs to get boosted up a little bit as well, like so, into a V3. Oops, that. And then we're going to have to actually take vector 3s when we set things. Again, just pushing the compiler.
All right, so rather than try and like follow him here, I might just run through as much of this on my own as I can, because it really should just be updating all the calls and all the parameters where it's necessary. So what was that invalid P thing? Yeah, so this is a V3 now. And I really wish I could just splat that out. Feels weird having to write the same thing out 3 times. Feels unnecessary. Okay, so this, what is sim P? We'll just assume that this can take a vector 3 now. Get sim space P. I trust we can just say, yeah, well that returns vector 3 already, so what's going on there? What? Did I not save that? What does this say? Oh, is in rectangle. That probably, what? Oh, okay. That needs to take a vector 3, so that's good. I don't understand. I mean, we changed invalid P to be a vector 3, so why are you complaining? Oh, that's weird. Now the error's gone. I thought I saved this file, but I guess not. And then this here is going to be just a vector 3, so I think I can just do that. Okay. Just keep working through these. I don't know, I guess it'd be one thing if we were like playing a game and I was really upset versus programming. I would go like to some place where there would be a bunch of like really easy kills to be found and just start wrecking, you know, some, like if it was Skyrim, I'd just go and wreck some bandit camp or something out of frustration. Okay, so which of these is not what it should be? That 1 over length looks suspicious. Why can't I go to definition of that? Oh, that is just a scalar. So what's going on here? One of you is not what you should be. Oh, because DDP is probably, yeah, we want that to be a vector 3. Okay. Then over here, the acceleration is now going to be a vector 3. Just keep on rolling through these as fast as we can. Make entity spatial, probably just needs to take a vector 3. Sword is not what it needs to be, I guess. guess we're just going to make everything. I'm going to throw caution to the wind here and hope that I'm doing this right. Well, maybe... Yeah, would we ever want sword to travel in the Z direction? It's worth thinking about, I guess, but... I mean, we changed... Yeah, it would be too confusing not to do this way. It doesn't hurt anything. It doesn't make anything more convoluted to do things this way. Okay, and then we go... This might actually be the last of our problems here. Just add 0 to the end, because we're not going to change the Z direction, although it'd be interesting to see how that would play out on screen, I guess, if we just had it go like in an arc. And that would be a thing, like if you wanted to see like the rock being thrown in an arc, you would have, you know, that those motion equations play along the Z as well. I didn't even see what that error was. What is going on here? Okay. Oh yeah, interesting. That's how would you even think about translating Z based on what the controller is doing, right? I guess you just wouldn't, because the Z would be affected based on, like, maybe if you like held a button because you had a jetpack on, or you walked up a staircase. Yeah, not worth thinking too hard about that. What is this? I'm guessing that wall normal is probably a V2. This kind of feels strange. But I'm just going to go with it. So we're building. Looks like we're building. It's happening. Yeah, so that looks about right. This is more or less where Casey ends up. Now the game world is all out of whack, but we'll see. He's got a lot, and I mean a lot. That whole side of the screen is all compiler errors, so let him work through it.
Errors forward to like bring me through the code in a front that will allow me to change the things that need to get changed, right? If that makes sense. So we're all good. The result here, now again, we can now make this change that we didn't make before. Now our result is just that. It's just the direct result of the subtraction. The sims...
I guess I did not catch that. Where was that? In get simspace p. Where even is that call? Oh yeah, you can just do that. And we aren't declaring it, so we just sign it and we're off.
Space p is the same thing that we're just calling there. It's now going to return us a v3. So off we go with that. And our add entity is going to have to be upgraded to take one as well. So that is taking a v3 now, like so. Let's take a look in here. Again, same thing, just change that up. And most of these are just passing through, so I don't suspect there'd be a whole lot there. So we do our is in rectangle check. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of thinking that we pretty much always want that is in rectangle check to go ahead and be on a rectangle 3. So I'm sort of thinking, so let's just go ahead and do that now, right? Let's just go ahead and do that so that we don't have to deal with it later. We'll just say that we're going to actually have rectangle 3s as well. And I don't even know if we really need rectangle 2s anymore, but, you know, what are you going to do? So let's see. Where are our rectangle 2s? They should have been in here somewhere. There they are. So those guys are going to be rectangle 3s, and then I'll just go into our math again and build those out. So here is our rectangle 2. No, Casey, rectangle 2.
Okay, so might as well do the same thing. So we have all of these. I don't know if it makes sense to just copy all of them. But maybe it does. And then we change everything to be about rectangle 3s. Right? And then that just means all of this stuff has to work with vector 3s. Let's see. So, well, we can just do procedure groups for the overlapping calls, right? I don't know what to do as far as the names go, but maybe just like rect3 get center, rect3 min dim, that sort of thing. Yeah, we're already set up to kind of do that anyways, so. That's what we'll do. Not sure about this add radius to business. We can just comment out all the things that we don't need to translate quite yet. There's one case where things aren't quite so smooth in Odin just because we don't have function overloading, but the procedure group thing, it makes it easier. It allows us to still do something kind of like that, but it's not. I still have to go ahead and write the groups, and then I have to think about the naming scheme for all of the procedures that those groups map to. You win some, you lose some. Okay, so I think now we just want to say get center. Right, I don't think, was it called rect get center before? I think it was just called get center. You weren't even using it anywhere, so I guess it's irrelevant. But what was it? Yeah, it was just get center. So get center should be procedure group, like so. And then we can just do the same thing. We could just write another note here for rectangle procedure groups. I don't know, seems reasonable. Min dim, are we calling that anywhere? Min dim? Not that I can see. Because I know Casey just like throws in a bunch of these helpers, but we're not really at a place where we're using them quite yet. And so that's why I don't care to like get them all working nicely for rectangle 3s if we aren't going to use them quite yet. What was that? It was center dim, center half dim. I know we used one or both of those. Center dim, let me check. Yeah, so that one I did prefix. These should all be prefixed with rect, probably. Okay, and then center, what was it, center half dim? Let me make sure. I just don't want to have to go all over the place and start changing code. It'll be nice to just be able to call everything else exactly the way we were calling them, just change the types we're passing in, based on the members or, you know, whatever local variable we're using in that place. Right? Half dim. Yeah, we don't need get in there. What else? Center half dim, min dim, add radius is in rectangle. I know it is in rectangle. We definitely want... Yeah, we'll just do the add radius one as well. I know we're using that somewhere else. We're actually using add radius at least in one place. So rect2 add radius, or was it add radius to rect2? Yeah. Is that it? I can't remember. Add radius to... Yeah. Yeah, I should just change those. It should all be prefixed accordingly. None of this. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. Okay, and then that just leaves is in rectangle. So rect3 is in rect. Whoops. Rect3 and damn it. And rect2. And so that just means we got to change these around. What was that? Oh, I did do this one properly, or didn't I? I don't even remember. Rect3 is in rect. Just gonna comment that out for now. Okay, I think we might be good. I guess it is in rectangle. I was thinking that as I was compiling. I think I spelled that all out. Okay, cool. Oh no, what'd I just do?